good evening, or good morning, wherever you're listening or watching. We're back. It's the three of us. It's me. It's Daly, August, Morgan.
Great.
We are essentially pivoting slightly away from the guest podcasts for this episode. So we're going to actually talk about a topic that we have had on our minds over the last couple of weeks. I suppose because we've had a slowing down of our off-season efforts. But without further ado, the conversation today, the off-season reflection of this summer's off-season. And to those that don't know what an off-season is, it is essentially the period where the professional players across Europe are on their in-season break. Well, it's not even in-season, it's off-season, but they're on a break.
After the season.
After the season.
Pre-season.
Post-season.
As everyone says now
that
these
actually
days.
is a new term, The pre-season. I think even Stat Sports done an article on it. Sky Sports done an article on it. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely something that we have been early mover advantage, or we have early mover advantage in, and we've got good skin in the game now, really, at that sense. So unfortunately, I wasn't really on the pitch that much, except for some refereeing that you can see on YouTube.
First question.
And first question, what is it, Gary?
How was it to referee pros? Nightmare.
I have to say now, the first time we played an 8v8 game.
10v10.
10v10 game, wasn't it?
10v10.
Jeez, yeah, it was buzzing. 10v10 game. We had a whole host of Irish Under-21s internationals. We had a whole host of even current League of Ireland players and a few players that we haven't even seen before, really, that were just
Championship, League One.
Championship and League One, yeah.
Scotland. Couple in Scotland. Anyone playing up north? Can't
In the
remember
first game?
No.
No, I don't think anyone. Anyway, very good standard.
And refereeing it, if I'm being honest with you, the first day I was nervous. I was nervous
for you.
I know the boys were giving you loads, but I think you were good.
You were good.
I would have been way worse. I let way too much go. I'm a bit like, play on. But then that's like a bad way to be in them games.
I was nervous because I didn't want to disrupt the flow. At the end of the day, we're trying to provide a service. The games are great and players come for games. They love games. I didn't want to disrupt flow. I didn't want to micromanage it, but I wanted to make sure players were safe as well. It's kind of like a weird balance, if that makes sense, being a ref. But I tell you what, I learned a lot about like refereeing positions and stuff. I know the lads are slagging me like getting on a pivot and sprinting, but you actually have to have your body shape correct to see where the play is progressing, where it's going to progress, and getting yourself in the right areas. That's something that I think is key in refereeing. And this is coming from somebody who has zero referee background, is like anticipating where the ball is going to go so you are in the right position to make the calls. But some players were giving me stick on that game.
I think that's just competitive fire, though, isn't it? Like they don't even see you. They just see he's making the decision. I'm angry at him.
Yeah.
Or I'm more so angry at the decision you're making.
Absolutely.
And you're just the person that needs to receive it.
Because the same players that were like red in the face were just like a smile on their face, like 2 minutes there. It's absolute. Sport is incredible. Competitive sport with elite athletes, incredible to see the difference between competitive nature and then the moment it steps off. Because as you said, it's pre-season. What the hell is it like when they're playing under 60,000 people? I would actually argue the same, probably.
I would say
pretty
it's hard
to take them out of it, isn't it? Like some players are just naturally going to
I think
compete.
Anyone who competes at that high level has to be like that pretty much all the time.
When you watch the Community Shield the other day, you'd seen that with Pep and Arteta. They're both so all in, like that was a game to win. Like, even though I know people would say the Community Shield isn't important, but it's a game of football and it's a trophy at the end of the day. So
yeah, no doubt.
Winner.
I think one thing I really liked about refereeing the games. One thing I really liked about refereeing the games was being able to be in and amongst the communication. Small little things. Pro players don't overly communicate. Generally, like some coaches really emphasize communication. I think it's all about effective communication at the right time, right tone. And when you're in and amongst games, that's real authentic communication because they're not even thinking about it. It's just kind of like autopilot. Some of that was really cool. Another thing that I really enjoyed was the touch quality in and amongst the tight areas. Again, it's different from watching it on a sideline. Being in and amongst it and actually seeing the angles and going, Jesus Christ, like how did he get out of that?
The drone footage is a great one for that because I remember the footage of Jordo's reverse. Ola Lowell swivels out of like 3 players, and from the side angle it doesn't look like much, but when you watch it from above, the intricacy of the touches is absolutely outrageous. So when you're in it, I suppose like it's like you're in the possession grid or in the games. It's easier to see, isn't it? Because from the sideline, it's actually very hard to. I find that very difficult to watch. The perspective is awful. You don't see much at all of what's going on.
It's very difficult. I don't understand why Premier League managers. Well, I suppose a lot of them now have teams and microphones.
They probably
and
do, yeah,
stuff like that. But like the best view is the gantry, and the best view is to go up high tactically, even just to enjoy technically. You don't want to be. It's great for atmosphere when you're in and amongst it at the front, but I think to really get a good visual of the game, you got to be behind it. On the topic of the games, though, I suppose like you guys were coaching, so I'll probably just take the lead really in having a couple of questions. I've got a few in the top of my head. When it comes to the overall flow of the day. What is an off-season or an off-season one-on-one typically? How does it differ compared to what the normal one-on-ones would be?
I would say it's very relaxed, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very relaxed. Everyone's there to work. Everyone knows exactly what they're coming for. I suppose everyone that we've dealt with thus far, I think we're quite fortunate, is that when they come in the off-season, they know exactly what they're coming for. They know their outcomes. They know exactly how we work, and we just work towards that, towards the goal. So that could be, for example, if we know someone's going to be in, for example, let's pick Sean Rowan, who's going to be in 10 plus times in the off season. We'll communicate with him in March, January sometimes of like, okay, what is like, when are you going to be in? So we have a rough idea of scheduling. What are the days? He had an international camp. So it's like, he will give us his information of where he's going to be there, when he's not going to be there. So he'll give us like one or two main outcomes of a session. And we'll essentially, he will always rock up early. Other players will not rock up early just because the way they are. But the majority would come up quite early, I have to say. They will kind of do their own warm-up or whatever. We'll make like double down on the warm-up because it actually is very important, especially in pre-season when they fully relax the body. Some of them, not all of them do, to make sure that they're almost over-prepared for sessions, that they're fully ready to go. And then I think we're different coaches, so we have different styles, but the majority of it is quite similar. It's like you'd start with your technique work, a lot of low tempo work that is geared towards something very specific. Again, one of the main things we were chasing this off season was scanning, wasn't it? So trying to get very position specific scanning built into every player, because these players are already prepped technically where they can take in this information, while a one-on-one with someone for the first time, let's say playing under 16s, we don't know where they're at technically, so we need to figure that out first and master that first before we move on. Now, not saying all these players can't improve technically, because they can, and that's exactly what we chase for a lot of them. But after we do the first 15, 20 minutes of prep work, so that's technique, introducing scanning in a basic warm-up, then it pretty much goes, again, based off position, probably a technical pattern that overemphasize that goes really position specific, and you spend about 20 minutes on something and just nail it. So for me, if that's finishing end product, you work on a specific finish. If it's crossing for a fullback, you work on different variations of one cross and different scenarios. And what we had this year, actually, which was great, was obviously goalkeepers help big time, whether it's distribution or finishing, but also like getting centre halves and wingers and fullbacks 3 different sessions to train together. So you can train them all quite specifically, and a coach each will take each individual aspect of it. But that's the general style, isn't it? Like warm up, get your technique working there, introduce the topic.
I was just thinking there while you were talking, I would say I do no more than 10 different exercises. Yeah. I'd say that was my base. Like I very rarely varied exercises, in the sense of, if I was working with a centre half, come in, warm up like Morgan said, a little bit of change of direction stuff and whatnot, and then like with the ball, I might have went into a footwork exercise with hip rotation, and then it was like I had one exercise for scanning that I had different variations for, all just to get the frequency up and the timing, and then it would be position specific with it. And when the player would come in, then again, if it was a week later or a couple of days later, you sometimes can get into a mode of, if you keep changing your exercises, they have to relearn the pattern, so they're actually picking at, they're in for such a short time. You don't need them learning drills. You need them learning habits that they're going to take away.
That's a great point.
So I would literally do, like the centre half one, I don't know, take Dan O'Reilly, for example. I've probably done it with him 5 or 6 times, the same exercise. But he could come in and go, yeah, same thing we done. So he's not wasting any of his working memory on learning the exercise. He's gone, just getting reps. Because that's what they're there for, in the sense of it's picking something they want to add to their game. Scanning is the big one I do with everyone. And then some sort of technical aspect. And then, just cycle the same drills. There's nothing, honestly, my session set was pretty much the same every day. And I would just vary something very slightly depending on what I wanted to tweak, to be honest, which was interesting. And like you said, it was great to work with players together. Like, I think one of the best sessions we done when we put them together was, who was it, Jamie and Dave?
Okay,
two of them?
yeah, it was class.
Where we done like I'd be like a left winger, Morgan be like a 10 centre forward, and we'd working like sometimes I'd just put Morgan in the channel, they'd run and defend that. Then like even if they cleared it poorly, I'd get on it, play it to Morgan, go down the line, and we'd be whipping ball. It was mad, like 10-15 minutes was deadly though.
That's great.
And that's kind of a big thing you notice with them. They're training the one-on-one, you're not going to hear their communication a massive amount, they're whatever tidy, and it's a bit relaxed. The minute we went into that, the two of them just like vroom, they were like a light switch, and they just wouldn't stop talking. They were so it's like they were in a game, to be honest. Whereas everything else before that, they obviously train at a good tempo, but there's something a different level in terms of intensity once we put them together and made it like, right, we're trying to score on you now, and they just like a light switch communication. They're so aggressive, and even their actual football actions were a lot better as well.
So just to conclude on those original points, typically the session layout is actually easier compared to what a normal one-on-one would be. It's a lot more repetitive, and it's a lot more hyper-focused on specific outcomes. So the biggest difference really between taking an off-season one-on-one compared to what would be a 16-year-old, as you said, as an example, Morgan, is that you're trying to qualify a 16-year-old about what their weaknesses and their strengths are, whereas you know that a pro that's coming in is going to have a certain level of technical competence, and you're going to be chasing specific outcomes based on their position.
Pretty much perfectly summarized, yeah. And again, sometimes they'll be in a session and they will ask a really good question, and you might just not do any exercise at all, and you could start talking for 2 or 3 minutes and really slowly break down something that's so minute. Especially I find out with centre forwards, they'll ask a question about a technique in a certain area. It's like, right, our session plan originally might have been looking at runs from left to right from deep, but this question is really good and really specific. So let's just stay here for 5 minutes, because this is obviously something that's on your mind. Let's talk about it, and maybe let's change the exercise to suit that plan, and we can always get back to the other one if we want to work on it. So it's majority of the time you go in with a plan. Every coach goes in with a plan, but you always have to adapt it to some degree. But yeah, that was pretty much perfectly summarized.
Can I ask, why was scanning the big outcome that you were looking to chase with all players this year?
It's a question for you. You introduced it fully to us.
I think
you did the research.
There's a Twitter, basically, is where I was seeing it. There's a guy who does actual scanning, and when I say research, I mean like academic papers on it. And there's like links. Although sometimes what's the word? If something's like reliable in research? Is there standard deviation? I'll get it. But anyway,
Patrick's
screaming at me. Sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick, our health nutrition communication officer, is screaming here.
Yeah. So sorry, the papers, and in general, there seems to be a link between scan frequency, improving that, and then linking that in with like percentage of passes that go forward or successful passes. I think there's definitely a correlation between increasing scanning, and it increases the more forward passes you'd play. And then I think it's the actual success of them that is like, the difference is so small, it's kind of hard to put down. But it's kind of one of them things where it's like, everybody talks about the best players being like one step ahead of everyone, and if you watch them, it's because they're looking more. I can't watch football now without seeing scans.
Oh,
it's ridiculous.
It's everywhere.
And when you watch it, honestly,
everywhere.
watch Odegaard for 20 minutes, and you'll be like, he is unbelievable. Like how often they look away from the ball. And if you look up how much time you as an individual spend on the ball in a 90-minute game, it's probably like less than 1% of the game time.
Yeah.
Because everyone else has the ball, and the ball's at the other team, and the ball's between players. So like that, the idea of like, why would I spend all the time looking at just the ball if I have it for 1%? Like, everything around me is surely more important, and that kind of logic hit deep with me. And what's your man's name? I can't remember how to pronounce it, to be honest. Jordet or something like that.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. He was the one who does a lot of research with it and whatnot, and just seeing it and some of the stuff he was putting on Twitter and the videos and all, and the way it was explained. I even seen one there of Declan Rice the other day where it talked about how he is one of the best interceptions in the league last year. Opposition of the ball as they play it centre half to centre half, scans his shoulder as it's travelling, and then he takes a touch, scans again, he plays, intercepts, just because he's more aware of where the pass could go. And even like little things like that, I seen, I was like, that's something that's such a high level thing to improve on. So it kind of makes sense that we're trying to bring it into more of our sessions than just pros, but it makes sense as a blanket statement with all the pros to try add to their game, no matter what their position is. And then like I was saying earlier, I would pick then or chat to the pro on the first day and be like, is there anything you want to improve technically or positionally? And they might go, right, I'm a centre half, I want to work on my left to right diag, grand. And I would just incorporate scanning into that as well. It's just something that if everyone's more aware, you're going to be a better player. The best players look around the most.
It's definitely a cherry on top for a session for a pro. And I was going to say to you, Morgan, you heard from a couple of the pros that you were working with that they've never done scanning in any session before in their lifetimes, and that includes when they were young kids and also in the professional environment.
Can I say one thing on it as
Yes.
well? Sorry. And like, there's no consequence that like Haaland, for example, has an outrageous scan frequency for a centre forward. Centre forwards generally don't do it a lot because if they can feel a centre half, they don't need to look where he is. But if you actually watch Haaland between his movement, there has to be some sort of link between his awareness. How does he always get so free in the box and score these tap ins? It's his movement. And how is his movement good? Because
Visual
he's
perception.
aware of centre half's here, space is there. That's because he's looking around. So there's correlation between like the best players like Xavi when he played, who manages Barcelona now. He would scan 8 times in the 10 seconds before he received the ball. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like ridiculous. I've done a couple of our pros before I actually had sessions with them, and they were in and around 1 to 2 scans in the 10 seconds before they received the ball. And like Xavi was the top, and 1 or 2 of these were centre mids. So I'd done the frequency of like, and Xavi's 8 out of 8 before in the 10 seconds before he receives the ball, and then the pros I was working with were maybe 2. So that's a very
That's the
simple
great thing about it,
difference.
though. You go to them with something like that, and they're like, "Shy, I just got to up my game. Don't like, I've got to up my game. It's pretty simple and something
Pro
that you can
actually asked
chase."
me
Like,
that journey. I looked at a couple of your clips, and you're in and around 4 scans, or I think I said sorry, it was 3 scans 10 seconds before I received the ball. First thing they said was, "What's a top player do?" And I was like, that's what I had the facts with me. I was like, Xavi's 0.83, which is like 8 scans. So they're like, wow, that's like over double what I do. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was one of the best centimeters ever, like, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to ask?
I was just saying to Morgan, you've heard, you got some good feedback from some of the pros. That was a good thing to chase because they've never ever incorporated scanning. to
everyone
positions.
scans, right? That's why I've noticed. They wouldn't be able to tell you, but everyone does. It's the most natural instinct in the world. Ball's coming to me, look away. Am I in trouble? Am I not in trouble? That's the most basic version of it. Of that, the critical scan of just that last second. Am I in trouble? Am I not in trouble? Is there space? Is not space? That's it at a high level. But like when you actually speak to them about like where, why. So if you're left full and you're only checking your left shoulder just to see if there's pressure from a winger, you're picking up such a little amount of information. Now, vital, mind you, when the ball's on the way, if it's traveling, mind you, you got to glance, you got to see if I'm under pressure, am I not? Grand, that will only make one decision. But when you speak to them about, as the ball's at the right foot and the ball's traveling to your centre half, to your right centre half, then it's come to the left centre half. If you're just looking at the ball, you're missing everything that's going on. So everything that's going on behind you, you need to see that. And not just see it once at the last second. You need to see it like 7, 8, 9 times before the ball even gets to you. And it might not even get to you. That's the thing. You might see these patterns develop. And that is why there's good players and that's why there's world-class players. Is that they see, like you said, they see more and they see more often. So like that's such a simple thing. And when you tell them that, they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But it's funny. And I think we've discussed this before. It's like, pro players come into us, we have no idea what who's been working with them, what their background is. So as a blanket statement, I think their scan frequency is probably decent, which it is because they're pro footballers and they kind of have to. But has anyone ever pulled one of them aside and go, right, this is exactly where you're struggling. Here's how you need to look. Here's when you need to look. Here's why you need to look. It's like it's like a pro footballer. It's like some of them, you just expect, oh, he should be good at that. He's a pro footballer. But you might not be told how to receive at this angle or this angle. If you move the ball this way, here's how it's going to spin off. And you hit it with this part of your foot, it's going to spin that way. They're just so good that everyone expects them to know the answers. Well, sometimes when you explain it to them, especially with the likes of scanning, they're like, oh, I've never heard that before. Because again, they might go into a pro environment. I'm not going to spend time with an 18, 19-year-old who comes into my first team dressing room and teach him how to scan. I don't have the time. I need to teach him how to play in my system.
Yeah.
So when you isolate that, especially for these kids that are 16, 17 and get thrown into a first team dressing room, they don't have time to teach little Jimmy how to scan a shoulder. They've got to teach him how to play in this system.
They're gonna win a
He's
game.
not going to play.
Yeah.
Simple as. We've got a game at the weekend. We've got to win it. Here's how we're going to win it. Your scanning is not going to help us win the game. That's how they see it. But when you isolate it, and that's why we exist, when you show them how to do it and why, they will become a better player, and therefore in any system they're effective. And that's how we look at it. It's as simple as that.
I suppose in summary again, it's a low-hanging fruit based on reliable academic research. But everyone knows it intuitively. But when it is, let's say, academically backed, and it's also specific for each and every position. It's definitely, let's say, a low-hanging theory to
Like what's
incorporate.
It's not going to make a player worse.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, like it really isn't. If you're teaching them when to do it at the right time, it's not going to make them worse. And on it, what was I going to say? Oh, I'm not there.
But scanning is one of those things that can only really, well, it can be, let's say, trained in like possession grids, for example, because you do need contact to really practice it. But it is something that you can really work in detail in isolation, which is kind of where I suppose we fill the gap for sessions. It makes sense to do it.
But like how I would have coached it, and this the way I've seen it worded to me, was like too often you just shout, check your shoulders at people.
Yeah.
But like,
What the hell does that
where,
mean?
when, why, what am I looking for? When is the big one, because a lot of players that I found were checking completely wrong times. They were checking either way before the pass was coming into them, which is way too late, or they were checking as they were taking their touch, which is also an issue if you're on a dodgy pitch. So there's kind of that side of it too.
Yeah.
But a big misconception is people think the best players, they say have great vision. Like vision implies that, I don't know, Messi
Can see what we
can
don't.
see that chair better than I can. That doesn't make sense.
No,
With
yeah,
the same eyes, so to speak, but it's the idea of them seeing more is they look around more often. So that's how they have better vision. It's because they're looking around more and they're seeing more that way. They're not looking at that gap and seing a different gap to you. They're just finding it quicker because they're looking more.
They have better
more aware
visual
of everything.
context.
Exactly, yeah.
Or they're gathering better visual context.
Just
I
data
suppose.
is what you're looking for.
Data.
Data. So much data. Someone pressed me from my left shoulder. Grand. Is he pressing quick? Is he going slow? Is he going really aggressively? It's such simple stuff, but you need to be able to pick that information up and do something about it. That's why our exercises are really good. We believe, obviously, like the work we've done with the iPad. It probably looks silly, but it's like white color, blue color cone. Not just see it and say it. Can I immediately do something with the ball based off that action? And again, this is it in isolation, but we will contextualize it like, right, well, this will position it in a way as well where this white pole, when you scan it and you see that, the exact area where the cone is, that's where you're going to be getting pressure from. So here's your touch choice. Here's how you get out of this. And here's how you get it back on the ball with a second angle, whatever, depending on the context of the drill and the position. But like doing that in isolation is really hard. The pros really struggled with it. Yeah. Some were excellent. The frequency was already so high. And for example, one technical player who everyone has watched on Instagram over the last while is Gav Kilkenny. Technically, he's excellent. Excellent footballer. So even if he scans late and he gets the information, he's still so good technically, he'll find a way out of it. While more players will scan at the wrong times, and therefore when the ball arrives, they have to look far too late, and they don't have the technical ability at that scale to get out of it. And that's why more players get pinched. That's why more players give the ball away. And that's why some players are playing at a certain level. That's just the way it is. But if you can get that frequency up, look more frequently, you can make a much better decision. And technically, these players are good, but some are just substantially better than others. So you need to give yourself the best chance to secure the ball and do something positive for your team. And by looking more often, that's going to happen. It's pretty simple. The data's there.
Yeah, well said. It makes a lot of sense. When it comes to the general training attitude, what's the difference between a pro player and an amateur player?
Pro players are the most laid back footballers. The most laid back profession in the world. When they train, again, everyone's different, aren't they, personality wise? But in general, like they do this every day. People forget it's their job. Like they train all day, every day. They're not going to go out and burst the bank every single time. It's not going to happen.
Well, it's physically impossible.
It's not going to happen.
As the famous runner Jakob Ingebrigtsen says, the worst athletes train the hardest.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
They pick the right moments.
They pick the right moments to go,
switch
okay,
on.
this is where I've got to be at it. And again, we don't need to tell them that. And again, they know that better than we do. So they do it every day. It's their bread and butter. So again, personality will come into it a little bit. But in general, pros are super laid back. Where we would get frustrated in our sessions, maybe with small groups, is like in between sets, people kicking footballs around because it's messy, and especially with small groups or whatever. But pros are very laid back. They'll go and just kick a ball around for a while, but then when it's time to work, their switch is so quick that you don't care what they do in between because they're not disrupting anything, and I don't need 5 minutes to get them back. They're there. As soon as we go, right, play, it's like boom. Yeah. It's like a switch. That's the biggest thing. How quickly they can go from chilling to right, we're at work. Yeah. That's probably the main thing. Because it's very laissez-faire other than that. Very relaxed, very chill. And then when it's time to work, we're working. When we're in between sets, we're in between sets. There is very separate presence there. Like they are the same person, but two completely different mindsets. Within a flick of switch, they can change it as well.
And I think they obviously see it. I know this game, and you love it and all when you're growing up generally, but they do see it as work. And I didn't realize until being around them how much extras they do, like runs and all this. And I'm like, not one of them likes doing it. Yeah. But at the end of the day, in whatever job you do, there's aspects of it you're not gonna like doing. And nobody likes after an hour of training going and doing the runs that they have to do for their clubs. But every single one of them done it, or would drag the other lads to do it with. Like they'd always get it done. Like
standard setters,
which is like they're always doing that little bit extra, but like that they're always doing the things that like they don't want to do it, but sometimes you have to do it. It's part of your job at the end of the day. But like every session they were always doing a little bit of running, which was obviously they had to do it for their clubs generally, but like that it's always just extras for them.
Yeah, well said. So on a conclusion note there on that point, it's not like pros don't work as hard as like other players, or amateurs don't work as hard as pros. But the biggest difference is that when a pro is an hour, it's an hour well spent. There's not messing around between drills, exercises, warm-ups. When the player's resting, they're resting. When they're working, and there's not, let's say, a calorie.
There's no fluff.
Unused.
Yeah, it's no fluff.
Yeah, no fluff. And I think that's a big misconception with training, because like back to that Jakob Ingebrigtsen example, he trains every single day. No rest days. But there's a big difference between having no rest days and working at the correct capacity compared to busting your gut every day and just risking ruin. From just going by what you were saying there, the pros had a good idea of exactly what their club schedule was, what work they had to do for their club, what work they wanted to do with us, making sure that the risk of injury was extremely low and the output of, let's say, increased cardiovascular fitness and quality was increased.
Mm-hmm. It's working on your work, essentially.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is a job for them. Like that's kind of what people forget.
They're working on their job.
You know?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to go in your job, do an Excel sheet you don't want to do. Like that's just.
And like you said, it's funny is like someone will come up and they love it. They love the idea of getting a ball out, training, whatever. I don't care what we're doing. I just want to play. And some of them are like, I'm just here to like do my job. I know when I go back, someone else is going to be fitter than me. So I just got to make sure that I go into the new season with something new in my bag and I'm fit and I'm ready to go and I'm sharp. All of them want to go back sharp. That's what they all say, don't they? They want to be sharp when they go back.
That's one thing I find interesting in them, because I'm not a big fan of this now. They always finish with good reps and good, and I get why. I'd love to know the psychology of like, I presume it's because obviously you don't want to finish on something that's bad, but like any team I've worked with, I'm not a big, even people like doing panels and all, they like always want to finish when they score. I'm just not a fan of that. I'm like, that's not the way the game is.
Joe, it's interesting.
I get why they do it, but like if a pro said to me I want to do one more, I'd be like, all right, fair enough. But I don't like it.
For technique work and technical work, I have no problem giving someone an extra set, as in they want to go and get it really clean. I think it's just like a tick. It's like, right, I've done that well. I know exactly what I had to do and I succeeded that. With centre forwards especially, I am huge on chance, like percentages. You're not going to get many chances. You're going to get 100 reps in our session. But when we say last 10, it's your last 10. There's no more. And sometimes people will get extra out of me because they've trained so well. And like it's almost like they want to do it for fun. And you give them a little bit of fun. It's like, come on, we'll do an extra set or whatever. But like, there's times, especially when we know the players very well, where I'll go, this is it. Like, no more sets. So you could have bagged 98 out of 100 and your last two you miss. Live with that. You've got to go live with that now. You've missed the two chances. You're not going to get another chance. And simple as. However you react to that, I don't really care. But I would try to react to it positively because you know you've got another chance coming maybe in 20 minutes. Not from me, but in another session you will, and in a game you will. So it's like, you need to go home and be like, I missed a chance today. Or, I've had a great session up until the last two. Those last two, you knew there was an ultimatum and you couldn't score. So it's like the whole mental battle of going back. And again, they'll probably go and pull Ollie back, or whoever the goalkeeper is, go, come on, give us a few penalties or whatever. They're mad for that, the centre forwards. They just want to score to finish. And again, I've got no problem with that. And it's good to finish on that feeling of scoring, but you also need to live with missing, because how many chances do centre forwards miss, or attacking players? More than they'll score. So they need to live with that feeling as well. So I find that interesting. But technique-wise, everyone wants to finish on a good rep, and especially combinations with a big group where that's 2 to 5 players. They really want to get it flowing. Once it gets going, they just don't want it to stop. And if you break it, if you tell them to relax when it's broken down a little bit, they're like, no, keep going. They just want to get it perfect.
But then
Again,
when it's
nothing really
flowing,
wrong
they're
with
like, keep it going.
Yeah, exactly. You can't win, essentially, is what we're saying. Yeah, but it is cool. The technique
it's
side of things, I myself would like to finish on a good one. But I absolutely understand where it's like you didn't succeed fully in this one. It's okay.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Just move on.
Never even thought about that.
Like, all
the
them
way
were
to
that.
question that. Yeah.
If it was even like a scan next to us, they didn't do it well, they'd be like, give me one more.
Do you find that's the case in other non-pro one-on-ones?
No.
Or kids and all. No.
Is that just
I think it's a presence thing. They know their standard. They're very self-aware. I dropped below that standard. I know that wasn't good enough.
Yeah. Let's talk about the games. So I think everyone's got a good idea about the one-on-one sessions, exactly how you operate them, some of the cool insights that you've seen on an individual basis. What about the games? All accessible on our YouTube channel, by the way. 10v10, 8v8, and 6v6. If there's 3
Correct.
games, a second.
Brilliant.
Talk to me
What was
about
it,
your.
77? Never mind. Go on.
Talk about the insights that you saw in the games. Could be anything. Anything that stood out. Anything that was.
The dressing room. Silent for the first 10 minutes. Isn't it? Silent. Everyone walks in and then one character will come in and everyone doesn't shut up. That's what I noticed. Now, again, different environments, different players. Some of them are very good mates. Some of them know each other from international camps. Some of them don't know each other at all and they just get on and they vibe together, right? But it was generally very quiet initially and then someone comes in and it just doesn't, you can't get them back then. And then some players in the dressing room will not say a word. Doesn't matter who's in the dressing room. They are just locked in. Just one example from the first game. You'll see it in the video of Cini, right? Of just sitting, hood up. I don't think he said a word to anyone. And Cini is great mate to everyone there. Knew pretty much everyone there. Was literally in a camp with them a couple of days later. But he was like, I'm here to work. That's his approach though, and that's absolutely fine. Other people, it's like, I'm here to train, here to have good fun, good to get a good session in, get a sweat on. It's like, and it's all kind of bubbly, good vibes.
Social, like,
That's fine.
At the end of the day,
Both of them are absolutely fine. That's the thing. It's completely personable. Of whatever person, however they want to approach it, as long as they're not taking the piss, they'll be welcomed by everyone there. That's the thing. There's a mutual respect for everyone. It's like, if someone's taking the piss, for example, one of the lads was late one of the days and he got roasted. And he was very good mates with everyone. And he got absolutely roasted. And rightfully so. And he's a lovely guy. And he completely he was apologetic. I was about to say he was unapologetic. He was very apologetic. He just read the message wrong, supposedly. But yeah, things like that are absolutely fine. That's what I noticed, though. It's very interesting, the dressing room dynamic. Because the majority that do them games are quite young, aren't they? Like the profile of actual pro players is quite young. A lot of them are playing 21s or at international level, that is, and then obviously they're in senior dressing rooms. So that approach is interesting. But other than that, everyone's so different. Every player is so unique in their own ways. No one really is the exact same. Some would be silent for the first 2 games, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to switch it on. And then they'd go hell for leather. And again, like we were saying earlier, it's all outcome driven. Some are there to get a sweat on. Some are there to really improve. Some are there to test themselves against better players. Some are there to just go, this is a workout, take the box. Some are there, I'm only here to score. Everyone's got their own different outcomes. So that's also interesting. If you were to ask them, I'm sure they'd give you an answer. But again, some of these sessions had, 10v10, 20 players there. You know, all the staff. There's so many different personalities there. It's hard to individually pick each player. But like the football itself, the insight in the football,
the standard the first day was not great.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you.
Like, we done 7 games or 6 games. The first 3 games were brutal. It was just like no one could string at them together, to be honest, which makes sense to be fair, because they're only new together. But I thought the quality
of touches in the first game in the 10v10 were excellent. Like the technical aspects and display. It was the laziness that freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, and kind of going back to what you were saying about like where players are in their pre-season journey, a lot of them aren't going to be doing 100 kilometer, or 100 mile per hour intensity for games like that. But I still think there could have been a little bit more done, maybe potentially on covering ground, for example. Depending again where players were though in their own season. one of the things that I found really interesting was the diversity of players and their background stories. So, for example, the Lowell brothers came straight off a plane and came literally straight to the games. I just find that concept bizarre because I would have never have done anything like that in my life. Some of them had to, collect friends that they knew for ages who are all like pro footballers now. I just think the diversity of like the backstories.
People getting taxis from like the country and all.
It's very interesting. Yeah,
it's very interesting. Yeah.
One thing I did notice was the difference between a mid-20s senior footballer is compared to an 18-year-old senior footballer.
Chalk and cheese.
Especially in like the later games, the AVAs.
They're just, this is going to sound almost like a bad word to say, but they're just weathered, aren't they? They've been around.
Yeah.
They've been around. They've seen everything. Not that a 25-year-old seen more than a 30-year-old, but a 24-year-old, 25-year-old who's been in and around most levels of professional football has probably seen an awful lot in the game. Nothing. They've seen versions of you. They've seen versions of you.
Yeah.
They've heard our voice before. Like, it's nothing really new to them. They're very like malleable as well, is what I'd probably say.
On the one-on-ones with them kind of players, you can see the difference in self-awareness with a player who's like that 24 to 27, 28 to like an 18, 19-year-old. Because 18, 19-year-olds are like, right, Grant, I'm going back in the pre-season, I'm going to prove this, I'm going to do that. Whereas the ones who were older, like there was one of the lads who last season made a move that some players would say would be taking a step back. And I was like, what made you go there? And he went, manager wanted me, and manager played me, and manager wanted to keep me. So I want games. It's mad how they just think like, I need to play more games, so I'll play it wherever. Whereas other players be, if I want to go on loan, it has to be this club, or
I want to get this move, that move.
Yeah, the 18, 19-year-olds think, right, it's going to be next step. Whereas the 24 to 26-year-old are like, right, I might have to go here for a bit to double jump back up there, in a kind of way. They're nearly more self-aware in general is what I found.
Yeah.
Just because, again, it's hard for an 18-year-old. Like, I was not self-aware at all. Some would say, are we ever fully self-aware? But when you're like 18, 19, it's so hard to know what's the best thing to do for you. But when you've, like Morgan said, been a bit more weathered to 25 to 26, you're kind of like, you've tried all that other stuff. You're like, right, I want to play a game. So if I have to go and play in this league, that doesn't bother me.
Makes sense.
So manager wants to play you. Who cares what colour?
It's
what
probably
colour the badge is or what animal is on the badge.
Literally, it's that, isn't it? Players just want to play. They do not care about majority of things. As long as they're playing, the manager is the best manager they've ever had.
Yeah, I didn't realise as much. Like, the style doesn't matter to players. Because as a coach, I'm big on like the way I like the game to be played, and I'm like, players would like to play the way I want the game to be played, let's say. But the amount of players, and I watch some of their teams play, and they're like, yeah, no, love it. And I'm watching them going, use our muck, like, to watch. No offense, but they're like, no, like that. Manager's deadly, love it.
I'm playing.
And then like, you'd even ask me, does it matter how you win? No. They're like, overplay too much? Nah, want to win.
Business,
which is interesting. Like, I didn't think young players would be like that as much, to be honest. Still, like, yeah, I just found that interesting, to be honest.
I think that's some of the toughest transition for younger players.
Yeah,
is understanding that at this level I'm currently at, I can get it on half turn. I can play my little lovely combinations, little wall passes, and slip them through. But if that takes longer than me getting the ball and just whip it in the box, get in the box, give it to someone. He's better than you in the air. Give it to him. That's your job. We'll win games if you do that. You might not enjoy the game as much, but if you win, you'll very much learn over time that's how we want to do it. We just want to win games. So whatever gets us winning games, if I'm involved in it, I'm happy. That's the bottom line of it.
I find that interesting. I'm so not like that, to be honest, which is funny.
Yeah, I like a style. I like a system. I like knowing my role. But again, if you're playing, it's very hard to be like, I'm playing, but I want to play this way. No. You're playing. So you should be grateful for that. That's kind of the feeling of it, you know? And again, that's not always correct also. Like some of these teams or whatever, not saying the lads we've had in, but just in general, they do play bad football and they don't win many games. It's like, change something. But it's just like, this is what we're going to do. You play this way or piss off. Because there's many other clubs that are going to like want to take you in or whatever. It's a strange concept. But it's not a strange concept. Sorry. It's actually very simple. Your job is to play for the club when asked upon and go to win games.
I suppose that is a learning for you too, because that was pretty a misconception that you had previously.
Yeah, definitely for me, anyway.
the bottom line really is overall
It would change how I would coach a senior team. Purely from just
off that, just reflection.
yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating.
I would never coach a senior team. May I add?
Why?
Couldn't deal with that amount of personalities.
Really?
No. I love it on an individual basis. I love understanding the person at depth, but you can't do that in a team setting. And that's not what I want. Personally. That's not saying it's right or wrong, but that's myself. No way.
Yeah,
No.
even just being a ref, I think it'd be very difficult to manage.
Disaster.
Very difficult, yeah.
The problem is, though, is that to a player's credit, I mean, they don't give a shit about anybody else by themselves. Usually, let's say for the majority of the cases. How is one, like, obviously a lot of the great players talk about the great managers saying, like, I always felt a part of the team even when I wasn't in it. And if that's the bottom line of I'm happy as long as I'm playing. So is the common denominator between the great and the excellent managers is
Communal feeling.
can they create that communal atmosphere of
That's
even
the
if
thing.
I'm not playing, I still have a role here and I'm still enjoying it.
Many can't, and that's why you don't have many great teams.
Yeah.
There's very few great teams. Look around any league.
Yeah.
How many are top? Top of the top of the top of the top. Very, 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 very few. There's some great players who have some great moments, some great teams that have some great moments, but sustained consistency comes from top down, top to bottom, perfect. Everyone feels a part of the squad. And if you don't have that, cracks appear, whether you like it or not. And that's why it's so difficult to have very high performing, consistent top performers as a whole, as a collective. Because like you said, all these are happy as long as they're playing. So if little Michael, who's playing centre half behind me, isn't playing, I don't give a shit for him because I'm playing. And that's where you have issues. And again, it's very understandable because it is, it almost feels like if you can get to a stage where everyone's on the same hymn sheet, everyone's playing towards, it's like you need to earn your right to get there. But if you don't win your individual battles until you get to that stage where that communal feeling where it fits your style or whatever, you'll never kind of get that overall feeling, and you'll never have that, again, feeling of being in a high achieving, unbelievable team if you don't win them individual steps as you go up. And again, that's the tough reality of elite sport. Unfortunately, some of us will never get even close to it to even understand it.
Or even can't fathom it. That's the thing, really. I think even, technically we're not in it per se as like in professional environments every single day. We kind of get like a snippet. But like as you said, I think we can kind of accelerate the learnings because we can get really into the weeds with players individually. Which is always an interesting point of view, I think, because a player is a different person when they're talking to somebody that they don't know one-on-one. I think especially there's trust there and it's outside their club environments. I find a lot of senior players that I work with use us basically as like a football therapy session sometimes for just conversation based on like, oh, manager told me this or system of play was this. It could be anything, but it could just be like little conversation. So it's an interesting one. I was kind of keeping the back of the heads. Before we conclude, anything else that was of interest, or have we covered the majority?
One thing that is quickly is interesting is that nearly every player that comes in the off season is uncertain about where they're going to be next year. They don't know. They've got a year left in the contract. Is someone going to come in for me? Do I want to go? Am I going out on loan? They don't know. So like every single like summer, it's like, I don't know where I'm going to be living in the next month. I don't know who's going to be with me. I don't know if I'm going to be in a good they don't know. It's a life of uncertainty. And that's why it's nowhere near as luxurious as everyone paints it out to be.
I think it doesn't help that a lot of them are very laid back as well.
Also true.
You would imagine they might not be the most proactive on the flip side of it, but yeah, it's interesting. It's a mad, look, professional sport is mad when you think about it.
And on that note as well, like, I think fans, especially Irish fans, obviously because we're all Irish and we can see the Irish media and stuff, but there's a huge disconnect between fans and media versus actually what's going on. And I think fans and anybody that is watching professional sport needs to probably put a little bit more patience and empathy towards a national team, a player. They've got, realistically zero idea about what's going on.
The only reference point we generally have is what we see in front of us. So their output on the pitch and honestly, their wage. That's all everyone knows.
Yeah.
So they put 2 and 2 together and go, he's she's great, so on and so forth. and that's not enough of an opinion to really voice it. Again, everyone has their opinion. They can give an opinion on a performance, but as an overall thing, it's hard to judge that, like what's actually going on. And again, we're all suspects of it.
Yeah,
everyone is. It's natural to voice opinions or whatever, but yeah, we never really know what's an individual person's like.
Yeah,
what they're going through.
Interesting. So just in conclusion, we record a lot of off-season content, so all of that could be viewed within our YouTube channel. We have the 10v10 game up there. We have the AV8 game up there. We have the 6v6 game up there. We have some small group sessions with some of the best international players, 21s level that we have. We have some individual one-on-ones for most positions, if I'm not mistaken. We've got centre-half ones. We've got centre-mid ones.
As well.
Centre-forward ones. We've got more in the pipeline as well. So it'd be interesting for the listeners to listen to this, take a couple of the points that Morgan and Gary were saying, and look at the actual sessions themselves. See, can you see anything that the lads talked about today? I definitely think there's some nuggets in there for coaches, players, parents, any football fans, really. It's just good, entertaining content. So yeah, it'd be great if you could leave this video with a like and a subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, remember that you can add anywhere up to 5 stars for a review. We never ask for 5 stars. We just ask for an honest review. And anything else that we want to say as we conclude?
No. Take us out.
Bye-bye.